Her wedding dress was waiting, a symbol of hope and new beginnings. The venue was booked, every detail meticulously planned for a day that was meant to be filled with laughter, love, and the promise of forever. Annie Lee had dreamed of this moment for months, imagining herself walking down the aisle surrounded by friends and family, ready to start a new chapter with the man she loved. Guests were on their way, dressed in their finest, carrying gifts and good wishes. The air was thick with anticipation, as loved ones gathered to witness a union that was supposed to mark the beginning of a beautiful journey. The hall was decorated with flowers, the scent of fresh blooms mingling with the excitement of the day. But as the hours passed, an uneasy silence settled over the venue. The empty aisle, once meant for a radiant bride, remained untouched. The church pews, filled with expectant faces, slowly emptied as confusion turned to worry. Annie Lee would never walk down the aisle. Her absence was felt like a shadow, growing darker with each passing minute. On the very day she was to be married, Annie's life was brutally taken from her. The joy of the occasion was shattered, replaced by the flashing lights of police cars and the somber faces of officers. Rain began to fall, as if the sky itself mourned the loss. Her body was discovered days later, hidden behind a wall in the Yale laboratory where she worked. The very place that had been a source of pride and accomplishment for Annie became the scene of an unthinkable crime. Investigators swarmed the building, searching for answers in the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors. What should have been a day of joy and celebration became a day of horror and unimaginable loss. Family members who had traveled from far and wide to witness Annie's happiness now gathered in grief, clinging to each other for comfort. The untouched wedding decorations stood as silent witnesses to a future that would never be. The search for a missing bride quickly turned into a desperate hunt for a killer. Detectives pored over evidence, piecing together the final moments of Annie's life. The community, once united in celebration, now found itself gripped by fear and disbelief. The contrast between the joyful wedding plans and the grim reality of a murder investigation was almost too much to bear. Invitations that once promised happiness now served as painful reminders of what was lost. The wedding cake, untouched, sat beside evidence markers and police tape. Every detail of Annie's planned wedding became a symbol of a future stolen. The rings, the veil, the invitations, all transformed from tokens of love into haunting reminders of a life cut short. For her loved ones, the pain was immeasurable. As investigators delved deeper, the story that emerged was not one of love fulfilled, but of sudden, violent tragedy. The case files grew thicker, and the search for justice became a mission that would consume the days and nights of everyone involved. The search for answers began inside the walls of that Yale laboratory, where the promise of a bright future was extinguished in a single, devastating moment. Annie Lee was the embodiment of the American dream, a first-generation Vietnamese American, top of her class, and a rising star in science. Her journey was one of perseverance and hope, shaped by the sacrifices of her immigrant parents who had come to America seeking a better life for their children. Annie's academic achievements were not just a testament to her intelligence, but also to her relentless work ethic and the deep sense of responsibility she felt to honor her family's legacy. She was admired by her peers and professors alike, not only for her brilliance, but for her warmth and generosity. At Yale, Annie was pursuing a PhD in pharmacology, dedicating herself to groundbreaking research on enzymes that could one day help treat cancer. Her work was at the cutting edge of medical science, and she often spent long hours in the lab driven by a passion to make a difference in the world. She dreamed of contributing to discoveries that would save lives, and her mentors believed she was destined for greatness. Outside the lab, Annie's life was filled with love and joy. She was deeply in love with her fiancé Jonathan, and the two were planning a future together. Their engagement was a source of happiness and excitement, and Annie often spoke about her dreams of building a family and balancing her career with a fulfilling personal life. Annie's days were a blend of ambition and happiness. She managed to balance the intense demands of her studies with moments of laughter and relaxation, enjoying walks across the beautiful Yale campus and spending time with friends. Her optimism was infectious, and she inspired those around her to reach for their own dreams. The Yale School of Medicine, especially the secure building at 10 Amistad Street, became her second home. It was a place where she felt she belonged, surrounded by some of the brightest minds in the world. The building itself was a symbol of progress and innovation, a fortress of knowledge where Annie believed she was safe to pursue her ambitions. Security at the facility was taken seriously. Every door required a key card, and only authorized personnel could enter. The strict protocols were designed to protect both the valuable research and the people working inside. Annie, like her colleagues, trusted these measures and felt reassured by the sense of order and safety they provided. Within those walls, Annie was surrounded by a community of dedicated researchers and friends. The camaraderie in the lab was strong, and Annie thrived in the collaborative environment. She felt supported, respected, and secure, believing that nothing could threaten the bright future she was building. But beneath the surface, the very security she trusted would prove to be an illusion. The locked doors and surveillance cameras created a sense of safety, but they could not protect against every danger, especially those that came from within. The systems meant to protect her would instead become the very barriers that trapped her. In a place where she should have been safest, Annie found herself vulnerable to someone she thought she could trust, a colleague who shared her daily routines and walked the same halls. The threat wasn't from outside, it was someone who blended in, someone who was part of the same academic family. The betrayal was all the more devastating because it came from within the very community Annie loved. That fortress of science, once a place of hope and discovery, would become the scene of her final moments. A tragic reminder that even the safest places can harbor unimaginable danger. Tuesday, September 8th, 2009, 5 days before her wedding. Annie arrived at the lab, swiped her keycard, and disappeared inside. She was never seen alive again. When she missed meetings and didn't return home, her friends grew worried. Calls went unanswered. Her fiancé couldn't reach her. By nightfall, she was reported missing. Police focused on the lab building. Her purse, phone, and keys were still in her office. She had entered that morning but never left. The building became the center of a frantic search. Police and FBI scoured every inch but found nothing. For 5 days, the Yale campus was gripped by fear and confusion. The media swarmed, and the nation watched, asking, how could someone vanish from a high-security building? The answer would be more chilling than anyone imagined. The lab at 10 Amistad Street was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place where the brightest minds could work in peace, protected by layers of security. Entry required a key card, and every door was fitted with electronic locks. The building itself was designed to keep the outside world at bay, with reinforced glass and restricted access points. For those who worked there, the lab was more than just a workplace. It was a fortress, a second home where safety was taken for granted. Over 70 security cameras watched every hallway, every entrance, every corner. The constant hum of surveillance was a silent reminder that nothing went unseen. When investigators began their search for answers, they pored over hours of footage. The cameras captured Annie entering the building at 8:51 a.m., her face calm, unaware of the danger that awaited her. But as the hours ticked by, Annie was never seen leaving. The footage showed an empty hallway, doors opening and closing, but never her exit. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The evidence was clear. Whatever happened to Annie, happened inside those walls. The lab, once a place of safety, had become the scene of a chilling mystery. Her keycard activity stopped abruptly that morning. There were no further swipes, no sign she had tried to leave or move to another part of the building. It was as if time had frozen for her. The cameras and access logs created a detailed timeline, mapping every movement within the lab. Investigators traced every step, every door opened, every corridor crossed. But despite all the technology, the trail went cold. There were no clues pointing to an escape, no evidence of a struggle in the hallways. The mystery only deepened. There was no sign of forced entry, no unauthorized access. Every lock was intact, every log accounted for. The building had been sealed tight, just as it was designed to be. That left only one possibility. The suspect had to be someone with legitimate access, someone who belonged there, who knew the routines and the blind spots. The pool of suspects shrank to those with key cards and official clearance. Each name on the list was someone trusted, someone familiar. And it wasn't just about access, it was about knowledge. Only someone who understood the building's layout, its routines, and its secrets could have pulled this off. The killer wasn't an outsider. The evidence pointed to someone who worked alongside Annie, someone who shared her daily world. Suspicion fell on the people she saw every day, colleagues, friends, maybe even a mentor. The idea was chilling. The threat had come from within. The security that should have protected Annie, the very systems designed to keep her safe, had instead become her prison. The walls that kept danger out had trapped her inside with it. the investigation turned inward, focusing on the people who knew the lab best. Every staff member became a potential suspect, every relationship a possible motive. The search was no longer for an intruder, but for a colleague hiding in plain sight, someone who blended in, who knew how to avoid suspicion. The fortress had been breached from within, and the answer to Annie's disappearance lay somewhere among those trusted walls. Security cameras gave a timeline, but digital evidence told the real story. Investigators found an email from lab technician Raymond Clark to Annie, complaining about mice cage protocols. It seemed trivial, but it established friction between them. Access logs showed both Annie and Clark entered the same basement lab within minutes of each other. There were no cameras inside that room. The digital trail placed them together just before Annie vanished. Clark became the prime person of interest. The investigation now focused on his movements and behavior. 5 days later, on Annie's wedding day, investigators found her body hidden behind a wall in a basement utility chase. The scene was brutal. She had been strangled, her jaw and collarbone broken. This was not a panicked act, but a calculated effort to conceal the crime. The killer knew the building's hidden spaces. The hope of finding Annie alive was gone, replaced by the grim certainty of murder. The Yale community was shaken, and her family's worst fears were realized. The way her body was hidden pointed to someone familiar with the building. This was a methodical, chilling act. The investigation now had a clear direction. The horror was not just in the violence, but in the cold composure of the killer. The search for justice intensified. With Annie's body found, suspicion fell on Raymond Clark. He had access to the entire building and knew its secrets. Questioned by police, Clark was defensive and inconsistent. Physical evidence sealed his fate. A bloody sock with Annie's blood and Clark's DNA, a pen under her body with his DNA, and scratch marks on his arms. DNA on the wall panel and Annie's body matched Clark. The science was irrefutable. He was at the scene, involved in the attack and the cover-up. On September 17th, Clark was arrested and charged with murder. Colleagues were stunned. No one suspected he was capable of such violence. The arrest brought relief, but left one haunting question: why? The answer would prove elusive. When a crime is this brutal, we search for a motive. For Clark, the motive was murky. Prosecutors pointed to the email dispute. Clark, obsessed with control, was angered by Annie's disregard for lab protocols. A minor conflict escalated into fatal violence. Clark never confessed or explained his actions. He pleaded guilty under the Alford Doctrine, admitting the evidence would convict him, but not admitting guilt. At sentencing, he apologized to Annie's family, but offered no real explanation. The lack of motive only deepened the tragedy. Was it rage over a trivial issue or something more? We may never know. Sometimes there is no grand reason for evil, just a dark, inexplicable impulse. The senselessness of it all haunts those left behind. Annie Lee's murder shattered our assumptions about safety. We trust in locked doors and security systems, but the real danger can come from within. The Yale lab was a fortress, but Annie's killer was a trusted colleague. The illusion of safety was broken not by technology, but by a failure of humanity. This case reminds us that true safety is built on trust and respect, not just walls and cameras. Annie's story is a sobering lesson in the unpredictability of human behavior. Her legacy is a reminder to value life, foster respect, and never take safety for granted. If you're compelled by stories like this, follow us for more explorations into the shadows of the human experience.